also. In fact, Guruswamy is my classmate.
Okay, right.
We are neighbors. Okay. Yeah, in my hometown. Okay. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm supposed to take 4 lectures, but because of my tight schedule, I'm unable to spend time for preparation. So I will be taking 2 lectures. Yeah, I'll start with some basic problems in linear algebra. Then we will, as we move on, we will increase the complexity of the problems. Okay. Yeah, so even though it says that the workshop says that we will be only solving problems, but we will be, I'll be covering some basic theory and some data stuff. Okay. Okay, I think we'll start now. Can you see my screen? I'm sharing a file.
Yes,
yes, okay. Consider the vector space.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. That's nice. Okay. I'm trying with the new tool. It's OpenBoard. I think many people used it. But I use some other thing called S Pen. So this time I'm trying this whiteboard, OpenBoard. Let's see how it works. Okay. The first problem which we are discussing, which we are going to discuss today, is about vector spaces. Okay. So you consider the set of all functions from the complex from the complex plane to complex plane. Okay. Now the question is true or false. Okay. So mostly I'll write the questions in the true or false pattern, or choose the best option. We'll explain all the options. Okay. If it is a true statement, why it is true. If it is a false statement, why it is false. Both for both things we will try to give meaning. Yeah. The first question is if f of c is a finite dimensional space. Okay, so all of you know what's the definition of vector space. By finite dimensional, we mean the vector space has a basis which consists of finitely many elements. Okay, so typical example of finite dimensional spaces are, you can consider R power n. Okay, R power n is set of all a1 up to an. Such that each component AI is
Rajesh?
Yes.
Black screen only visible. Black screen only visible.
Oh, okay. I think then there is a problem with this thing. Wait a minute, I will. Okay. I should not try something new now. I'll go with my old thing. Okay, so this is Microsoft Edge. Here I'm more comfortable. Yeah. Yes.
Then now it is visible, right?
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah, I will do it. Same. Okay, so now you can see my presentation. Okay, it's a plain presentation. Problem 1, is it visible?
No, it's not visible. Problem is not visible. Problem is not visible, but your screen is visible, I think so.
Oh. Open all the windows. Microsoft Edge.
Now the question is visible, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. Yeah. So we are considering this vector space of functions from C to C. The question is whether f of C is finite dimensional. Okay. Okay. So before that, what is the, so if I say something is a vector space, we should specify what is the what are the operations. So it is the scalar multiplication and vector addition. Okay. So if you consider f of C to be set of all functions from, there is no restriction, only collection of all functions we are taking. Okay. The addition and the scalar multiplication are defined naturally. Okay. So when I take 2 elements, f and g belongs to, instead of repeatedly writing this strange notation, let me write x. Okay. Fg belongs to x. So how to add 2 elements of x? How to add 2 functions whose domain and codomain are complex plane? So this is the notation, f plus g. Okay. So f plus g is again a function from C to C. So its image is given by, so this is the definition, f of z plus g of z. So f and g are functions from C to C. So you do know what is f z and what is g z, and f is and g is a set of complex numbers. So adding two complex numbers is meaningful. So this is the way we are defining this vector addition for the collection of all functions from C to C. Okay. And the scalar multiplication, you take any complex scalar alpha. Okay, then I will take alpha f. Okay, so this is the symbol for the scalar multiplication. Okay, alpha f. This is defined to be, okay, compute the value of the function f at the point z. Okay, at each point z, and just multiply that by the scalar alpha. Okay, so do this for every z belongs to the complex plane. So in this way, we are defining the scalar vector addition and scalar multiplication. Okay, so it's a routine exercise to verify the collection of all the set X with together with the vector addition defined in this way and scalar multiplication defined in this way is a vector space. Okay. In fact, if you look at the definition carefully, so we have used the addition of complex numbers or multiplication of complex numbers in two places. Okay, of course, when you are defining this f plus g and alpha f. Okay, so there also, if you look at carefully, just we are using the images are complex numbers. Okay, the domain is a complex plane that we are not using to define this thing. Okay, so what I'm trying to say, you could expect some problems like you can replace this C by any non-empty set. Okay, you can replace this domain C by any non-empty set, still the definition is meaningful. Okay, so why I am emphasizing this point? If you take your Y to be a set with n elements, then this X or this f of, okay, this X defined in this way, X is equal to set of all functions from Y to C. This is nothing but C power n. Okay. Yeah, so in this way you can visualize many of the finite dimensional vector spaces, or at least R power n and C power n as a function space. Okay, yeah, so this is the vector space. The question is it a finite dimensional? Okay, so it is not a finite dimensional space. Okay, the reason is, so just we are dealing with only functions, so you can define this delta function. Okay, so you define delta x. Okay, for every x in complex plane C, you define the function delta x from C to C. Delta x of y is equal to, it has only two values. This value equal to 1 if y equal to x, and this value equal to 0 if y is different from x. Okay, so this is a function. This is a well-defined function. Okay, now if I take two different points x1 and x2 in the complex plane, what will happen to this the functions or the delta functions associated with this x1 and x2. So what I claim, this is linearly independent. When x1 and x2 are different, this delta x1 comma delta x2, this set is a linearly independent set in X. Okay, so remember, X is the simplified notion for that script F. So why it is linearly independent? So this is the usual way of when you want to show two functions are linearly independent. Okay, so naturally you will evaluate the function at some points and you will try to show any non-trivial linear combination cannot be equal to 0. Okay, so in other, or more precisely, suppose alpha times delta x1 plus beta times delta x2 is equal to 0 function. Okay, so alpha and beta are scalars, and this 0 is a 0 function. Okay, writing that, just keep in mind, this 0 is not scale 0. This 0 is 0 function. So now you have a function which is equal to 0 function. Okay, so now I want to show alpha and beta are equal to 0. Okay, so as I said in the beginning, just before this sentence, you have to use this evaluation. So you just evaluate this function at the point x1. Okay, if you evaluate this function at the point x1, what's happening? this quantity is equal to 0 of x1. Okay, this is x1. What's the value of this quantity? By definition, delta x1 of x1 is equal to 1 plus beta into delta x2 of x1, that is equal to 0. This is equal to 0. 0 of x2, that's a 0 function, so that maps everything to 0. This implies alpha equal to 0. So similarly, you consider the point x2. Okay, corresponding to x2, you will get a beta equal to 0. So that means whenever you take a linear combination of delta x1 and delta x2, where x1 and x2 are different elements of distinct elements of C, then the linear combination is equal to 0. The 0 function, this will happen only when alpha and beta are equal to 0. Okay, so that's same as saying that delta x1 and delta x2 are linearly independent. So delta x1 or delta x2, so on, delta xn. Okay. I want to show this is linearly independent. Okay, how do you show it? How to show that?
We evaluate at each point, like this.
Yeah, like in a similar way. Okay, so when you are doing this type of you do something for n equal to 2 and you do it, and I'm extending this for arbitrary n means. Okay, so naturally you have to apply mathematical induction. Okay, so what I'm trying to say. So this case, of course, as you said, you can show that delta x1. So if there is a linear combination, alpha 1 delta x1 plus alpha 2 delta x2 and so on, alpha n delta xn is equal to 0. Just evaluate this function, the single function alpha 1 into delta x1 plus and so on. Okay. First evaluate this function at the point x1. You will get alpha 1 equal to 0, and evaluate the function at the point x2. You will get alpha 2 equal to 0 and so on. Okay, so this is called inductively. You can show that these functions, this collection of all functions, delta xi, such that I belongs to n is linearly independent. Delta xi I belongs to n. This set is linearly independent for any n. Okay, does it solve the problem? So our question is whether this space is a finite dimensional space or not. Okay. So one way is like we can convince ourselves now this space is not a finite dimensional space. The reason is proof by contradiction. Suppose this space is a finite dimensional space, okay, then it has to have a finite number as a dimension. Okay, if you take that to be n, then you take delta x1 delta. Okay, I already used n. Let us take that to be k. If dimension of the space x is equal to k, then I will choose k plus 1 distinct elements from the complex plane. We have uncountably many complex numbers, so you can choose k plus 1 distinct complex numbers. Look at the corresponding functions. Okay, delta x1, delta x2 up to delta xk plus 1, which is a linearly independent set. Okay, we don't know whether it's a basis or not, but it is a linearly independent set with the k plus 1 elements. But if your assumption is you have your dimension of your space is k, that means that the basis has k elements. Now, using this argument, you are able to cook up a linearly independent set which is having k plus 1 elements, which is strictly greater than k. A first course in linear algebra, you know, if you have a finite dimensional space, or if you have any vector space, the cardinalities of any two bases of the vector space are the same. Okay, so if you have a linearly independent set which is having k plus 1 elements, okay, and there's another result in linear algebra is that if you have a linearly independent set, then you can extend that linearly independent set to a basis. Yeah, you have any question? Any doubt? Yeah, please feel free to interact. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So any linearly independent set can be extended to a basis. Okay. So if this linearly independent set with the k plus 1 elements can be extended to a basis, so that basis will contain at least k plus 1 elements. Okay, but already we have a basis consist of k elements. These two simultaneously cannot happen. So this is a contradiction to the assumption that the space is a finite dimensional space. Okay, so it's an infinite dimensional space. So answer to the first question is false. but I will not stop here. Let us analyze this problem further. Okay. So what can you say about okay, of course this is an infinite dimensional space, so you do know there are many infinite, you don't know many infinities are there. Okay. What will be the dimension of this space? Will it be the countable infinity or uncountable infinity?
It is uncountable infinity because we can generate with respect to x, and x varies over c. It is uncountable.
Okay, so everything. Okay,
Yeah.
so okay, so that means that I have to give a linearly independent set which consists of uncountably many elements, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what is the uncountable linearly independent set?
Okay. Uncountably linearly independent set.
Yes.
Yeah. So what we do is linearly, we will take any family of elements, and that should be linear independent. They should be linearly independent. Finite family. I should say finite family.
Okay, good. So that was my next question I was about to ask, but yeah, you are right. The thing is, so if you consider this collection delta x such that x belongs to C, if you consider this collection, this is an uncountable collection. Okay, and so if you have finitely many vectors, then you don't know how to check whether the given set is linearly independent or not. Okay, and if you are having an infinite set, okay, so that is a misconception, or maybe many of us might have thought I will take an infinite linear sum, okay, and then I will check whether if the infinite linear sum is equal to 0, then whether the coefficients are equal to 0 or not. Okay, some of us might have thought in this way. Okay, so if we have an infinite set, to check whether the infinite set is linearly independent or not, we have to focus on all the finite subsets of that infinite set. Okay, irrespective of whether it is uncountable or countable. So you take any finite subset of this set. Okay, so this will be of the form something like delta x1, delta x2 up to delta xn, which we already proved that which is linearly independent. So that implies that this uncountable collection is linearly independent. Okay, so again you can apply Zone's lemma or any of the equivalent forms of axiom of choice. You can extend this to a basis for the functions from C to C. Okay. Okay, maybe I'm just thinking, will it be a basis? Yeah, it's a good question to think. Is it a basis? Suppose next question I'm asking. It's an uncountable linearly independent set. Okay, that I agree. Will it be a basis? Yeah, now I think this is a sort of new question. It's good to interact. Yeah.
That I was going to ask, is it going to be, since it is a Banach space, a complete space, like, because
No, I don't give any norm at all. This is completely all functions we are taking. I don't know whether can we give a norm here or not. All functions I am taking, which norm you will give. Okay, so let us not go into functional analysis, just from a linear algebraic point of view.
Yes, sir. This set
I think
forms
so.
a
This will
basis.
not form a basis.
Sorry?
This
This
will not
set-
form a basis, sir, because if it forms a basis, every function can be written as a linear sum of these functions, but
Yes.
it is not possible.
Why?
Because defining property of this function is like that.
So reasoning, when you are giving, you have to give a
Suppose if we take this function x square plus x plus 1, simple function, and then if we can write this function as some alpha times delta x1 plus beta times delta x2 plus etc. Okay, so by the defining property of this function, we can evaluate this expression at the point x1.
Okay.
Okay, so it will be left hand side will be x1 square plus x1 plus 1, whereas right hand side will be simply alpha will come.
Okay, let us see. Other options? Anybody else? Anyone else? Do you have any other simple argument? Okay. See, you want to answer? Anyone? Anyone of you? Okay. See, so I was emphasizing that by linear combination we are taking only finite linear combination. Okay. So if a function is if a function f belongs to span of if function f belongs to span of this delta delta xi, that means that you will be able to find out the finitely many alphas. Okay, so just I'm writing alpha 1 f1 plus alpha 2 f2 and so on plus alpha, let's say alpha s fs. Okay, now you take
Whether
okay.
this is infinite sum or finite sum.
So linear sum, it's always finite. So that I mentioned already. Okay, so linear sum or linear combination, whatever we are taking, okay, in the linear algebra course, it should be a finite linear sum. So we don't know what is the meaning of infinite sum in linear algebra. Okay, so we are not infinite sum. So infinite sum is not defined in a linear algebra course. Not infinite sum, because infinite sum, it doesn't make sense here. What is the meaning of adding infinitely many vectors? Unless you don't have a norm, you don't know how to add infinitely many vectors. Okay, yeah. So here my point is so linear combination, or if a vector or a function f belongs to the span of uncountably many elements, means only finitely many elements are matters. Okay, so that means f is of the form f is equal to alpha 1 f1 plus alpha 2 f2 up to alpha n f alpha s fs. Okay, so now you look at this side. So for the range of this function, okay, whatever z you are going to take, okay, so what are the possible ranges for what are the possible values for this f of z? So if z is equal to one of the xi's, okay, I have written f1, you think of this as fx1 for some x, okay, x1 x's. You substitute this z in all these functions, okay, at most in one place you will get a non-zero number 1. Okay, otherwise you will get 0 always. So the possible images for your function f are, I should okay,
Alpha
sorry,
1 to alpha n and 0.
0 alpha 1 to alpha n. So that means if your function can be written as a linear combination of this uncountably many, if it is a linear combination of these delta functions, then it should have range finite. Okay, so what example he gave, that was a perfect example, because that function has infinitely many elements in its domain, in its code, in its range. Okay, so in fact more generally can be said, you take any function whose codomain is whose range is not a finite set, okay, whose range is an infinite set, those elements cannot be written as a linear combination of this linearly independent set. So hence it is not a basis. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. In fact, construction of basis for most of the infinite dimensional spaces, especially if it is of uncountable dimension, it's not an easy task to construct explicit basis. Okay, mostly we will use axiom of choice or Zone's lemma to show only the existence of basis. Okay, so even R over Q, this is very well known to you, very well known to all of you. Okay, have you seen any explicit basis for this vector space R over Q? Q is a field. R has naturally that plus and addition, vector addition and scalar multiplication. Okay, with respect to the usual operations, have you seen any basis for R over Q? It's one of the fundamental questions one might have asked in the first course in linear algebra. Any one of you? Or any set which contains a basis for it?
Every singleton set is a basis.
How do you show that? So 1 and 2 both are singleton sets, but they are linearly dependent.
No, I'm telling singleton 1 is a basis.
Yes. It's not a basis. R over Q, not R over R. R over Q. If you tell me 1 as a basis for this vector space, I will give the element √2. Okay.
Okay. I got the point.
Yes.
Okay.
So √2 you cannot produce it. Okay.
Okay.
So this is a tricky question. This is like maybe most of us don't know this. Okay. So in fact, there is no easy construction of this basis. Yeah, I guess most of you are attending this lecture to clear the JRF or LS. After that, you will do research or you are going to teach to your students. You should know it. So there is an interesting article. It's called by Sundar and Nadkarni. So already the course on measured theory is already done. Okay, so I have a privilege to assume all the fundamentals like topology and functional topology and measured theory. Everything I will assume. Okay, just I will not just stick to this thing. Okay, so in fact, it has been proved that you take any Hamel basis. Okay, so Hamel basis is the name for the usual vector space basis. Because when you are doing a functional analysis, you do have one more basis. It's called Sauder basis. Okay, so the difference between Hamel basis and Sauder basis is in Hamel basis we will consider the linear combinations only finite linear combinations. Okay, so Hamel basis is meaningful for both the vector spaces as well as for the norm linear spaces. On the other hand, there is another basis. It's called Sauder basis. Okay, the Sauder basis is defined only for norm spaces because there you will consider infinite linear sums. Okay? So you take a sequence of vectors. We say the sequence of vectors as a Sauder basis. If every element of the space can be written as the infinite linear sum of the elements of the sequence. Okay, so typical example for Sauder basis is if you consider the L2 space. Okay, for L2 of n, if you take the vectors E1, E2 up to En and so on, okay, where Ei stands for the vector whose ith entry is equal to 1, rest of the entries are equal to 0, okay, that will give you a Sauder basis for L2 of. Okay, again, as most of you know functional analysis, so this Sauder basis cannot be a Hamel basis. The reason is if you have a complete norm space, then any Hamel basis of the complete norm space should be uncountable. Okay, this collection EIs, it is a countable set. It's a countable set. So it's a Sauder basis, but it is not a Hamel basis. Okay, maybe you can expect questions like in near field exam, every Hamel basis is a Sauder basis, and every Sauder basis is a Hamel basis. This type of questions. Okay, so you don't so Sauder basis for infinite dimensional spaces, it cannot be a Hamel basis. Okay, so that's what I want to say here. Yeah. So now the Hamel basis for R over Q, if you have, cannot be Borel measurable. Okay. So this is an interesting result. This maybe the paper where it appeared or where this problem was considered. I can give you the reference. There is a paper. There is a kind of expository article by Professor Nadkarni and Professor V.S. Sundar. So Sundar was with IMSC. Okay, so they wrote an article. I don't remember the article name. It appeared in a Resonance. Okay, so there they have collected this. Okay, so there is a book called, I think they are referring to this book, J.C. Octofi. The book title is Measure and Category. Okay, so this category has nothing to do with the category theory of these objects and morphisms and all. This category stands for most of you know the first category and second category in real analysis. In metric spaces, you might have studied about this first category, second category using this F sigma and G delta sets. You could have studied. Okay, this stands for that category. So this book contains this thing. Okay, so you take any Hamel basis of R over Q. Okay, first of all, it cannot be a countable set. Okay, because if it is a countable set, as you are considering only finite linear combinations, okay, a simple argument from mathematical analysis will tell you countable union of countable sets is countable. Okay, so if you have a countable basis for R over Q, okay, I repeat, if you have a countable basis for the vector space R over Q, then R will become countable. Okay, it's a simple exercise. At least at this stage, it's a simple exercise. Those who have done a master's in MSc in mathematics. Okay, so you should be able to verify. So any any Hamel basis of R over Q should be uncountable. Moreover, it cannot be Borel measurable. Okay, so I guess you know the definition of Borel measurability. Okay, and then so I was referring to this book and the article by Nadkarni and Sundar. So in that one, they are constructing a Hamel basis which is Lebesgue measurable. Okay, so Lebesgue measurable is weaker than Borel measurable. Borel measurability will imply Lebesgue measurability. Okay, not vice versa. Lebesgue measurability is much more is applicable for much more larger class. Okay, so that paper contains this thing. Yeah, this will be useful for sometimes when you're teaching a course on measure theory, you can use these things. Okay, so what I said, so this you see, this is an algebraic quantity Hamel basis. Borel measure is an analysis object. Okay? They are nicely interconnected. That's the beauty of this object.
Sir, so
Yes.
the linearly independent set which we have constructed forms a Hamel basis for this space,
No,
right?
no. Because if I take a function which is having a infinite range, then you cannot construct, you cannot write down that function as a linear combination of these finitely many linear combination of.
Sir,
Yes.
in Hamel basis, you said infinite linear combination.
Infinite linear combination only for Schauder basis.
Okay.
Schauder basis.
Okay. My question is it the set we constructed from a Schauder basis, right?
That I have to check. I'm not sure.
Because suppose if we want to express every function as a linear combination of these functions, right?
I doubt that, because R over Q, if you consider that, if the range of your function is again uncountable,
Okay.
so Schauder basis. Okay. First of all, Schauder basis, as per my knowledge, I read it long back, it is a countable set. It's a sequence. Okay. We say a sequence is Schauder basis. Here we are constructing an infinite uncountable element. I think we cannot call this a Schauder basis. Okay. So even then, yeah, I'm not sure about the terminology. You can check that. But anyway, that's a good question. You can take this as an exercise. Okay. Okay. So yeah, just we started only one problem. But
Sir, sorry.
Yes. Yes.
Sir, my doubt is not here. The del x we have shown it is a linearly independent set.
Yes.
So for the set of all functions from C to C, now we consider. Suppose if we take any arbitrary function f, we want to express f as a linear combination of these del xi. So we can choose our del x1 as f of x. If oh, sorry, sir. I wrongly understood.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If you have infinitely many elements in the range, then you will not be able to get that function. Okay, if you look at from the reverse direction, it will be easy. You take any finite linear combination of these elements. Okay, the only possible elements which can be in the range space are 0, alpha 1, alpha 2 up to alpha n. You cannot get any other element in the range space. Okay. Yeah. Good.
Right.
Yeah. And the second question is there's a set of all even functions. So what I mean by even functions, if you consider f of minus z, that should be equal to f of z. This should hold true for every z belongs to your complex plane C. Okay, so f belongs to x such that this is the case. Okay, so this is obviously a subset of x. Okay, and of course it inherits the multiplication, scalar multiplication and the vector addition from the parent space x. Okay, so I'm considering this as a subset of this vector space x comma plus comma dot. Okay, so we had to check whether it's a subspace or not. So we had to check only two conditions. Now you see alpha f plus beta g. Okay, so of minus x, if you see, just you apply the elementary arguments, you will get this same as alpha g times g of x. Okay, it is same as alpha times f plus beta times g of x. I'm just skipping an intermediate step. I could have written minus x over here. Okay, if I'm applying this thing, it will be minus x. But f and g are, if I take from let me give a name for it, maybe some script e, let us write. Okay, this e, if you take, then f of minus x will be equal to f of x, and g of minus x will be equal to g of x. Okay, so just I'm skipping that intermediate step. So similarly, you can take alpha f. Okay, so here by definition, this quantity is same as alpha of minus f of minus x, which is equal to alpha times f of x, as f belongs to script t. Okay, that is same as alpha f of x. Okay. So that means that the functions, the scalar multiplication and the vector addition, they are closed. So it's a subspace. Okay. What about odd functions? Call it by some fancy O. So needless to say, I think all of you know what's the definition of an odd function. I think f of minus z is equal to minus f of z for every z belongs to C. Is it a vector space?
Not a subspace.
Why?
Not a subspace.
Okay, it's not a subspace. Why? One option is
Because zero function will not be there.
no, 0 will be there, right?
So
0 of minus z is equal to,
zero will be there.
Yeah.
It will not satisfy that condition.
which condition? We have to be more precise. Okay, so let us see. Let us
Alpha.
verify what is
Alpha f plus beta g of minus x is equal to that condition.
alpha f plus beta g. Good. You take minus x. This will be alpha times f of minus x plus beta times g of minus x. Okay, so this is same as alpha times minus f of x plus beta times minus g of x is equal to minus alpha f plus beta g times x. Okay, that is this part. Do something when you are reading after some time, it should be image of f is finite. Okay, you understood this, that is good. Yeah, let's go for this problem. Okay, so this is true. What about the second condition? Alpha f into minus x is equal to alpha of minus x, which is equal to alpha times minus f of x, which is equal to minus alpha times f of x. That is equal to minus of alpha f times x. So what's the conclusion? Are you doing any mistake?
It's a vector subspace.
Wait a minute. Let me check that. If we take f of minus x, then I can take this outside. Yeah. Okay. So what about 0? So 0 also, 0 of minus x is a 0, which is equal to minus 0 of x for every x. Okay. Yeah. So is it clear, or we are missing something?
Yes.
Okay, so I think this is a subspace if we are not doing any mistake. Okay, yeah. Then what about the next one? The set of all continuous functions. Is it a subspace?
Yes, sir, definitely.
Yes, sir. It
It's a
is.
subspace. Okay, so basic course in real analysis says that these two objects will be subspaces. Set of all continuous functions from C to C and set of all differentiable functions from C to C. Okay, so maybe differentiable, if it is confusing, you take differentiable everywhere. I will take. You can take analytic functions. Okay, from holomorphic functions from C to C. So they are all subspaces. Yeah, and more interesting question would be maybe if you consider what type of infinite dimensional spaces these two spaces are, that is a more interesting question to consider. Okay, so what is the dimension of the set of all continuous functions from C to C? So can it be countably infinite or uncountably infinite?
Uncountably infinite.
It should be uncountably infinite for both the spaces. It should be okay. What is the reason?
Same argument. So suppose countably infinite means every function can be written as a linear sum of these continuous functions.
No. First of all, when you are taking a basis or when you are taking a linearly independent set, that should belong to your space. Okay. If I take the set of all continuous functions or set of all differentiable functions, this delta x will not work. This delta x is not a continuous function. This delta x, it's not a continuous function.
Yes.
Okay. So the small points you should take care about it. You should take care. Okay. Any argument?
We want to prove that
See
it is,
sin x cos x.
Sin x cos x, only two functions you will get. Other than that,
No.
No,
Functions from C to C, we may have a discontinuous function also. So if we write any function as a linear combination of continuous function, then that function also continuous function. So in this set, we may have a discontinuous functions also.
no, sum of two continuous functions is like always a continuous function. So if you consider collection of all continuous functions, their sum will be always a continuous function. It will never become a discontinuous function.
No, I'm telling, sir, in the vector space from C to C, we are considering functions. Okay, so that's our set. In that set, we may have discontinuous functions also.
Okay.
Okay, so suppose if we take that discontinuous function, we cannot write that discontinuous function as a linear combination of these continuous functions.
Okay, so first of all, we don't have to worry about discontinuous functions. Whether a discontinuous function can be written as the sum of continuous functions or not. Okay, that is not possible because discontinuous functions you cannot write as a sum of continuous functions. If your question is in the reverse way, can I write a continuous function as a sum of two discontinuous functions? That makes sense. Okay, but even if that is the question, so that is a nice point we should realize in the definition of basis. The basis should be always a subset of your vector space where you are starting. Okay. So here, if you argue like I will be able to write down all the continuous functions as a linear combination of this delta x, that is not sufficient. Okay? That is not true also. Okay, even if you come up with some other set which consists of discontinuous functions. Okay, so every element of or every continuous function, if it can be a linear combination of elements of those discontinuous functions, then you cannot claim that as a basis, because basis should be first of all element of your space. Okay, you cannot take element outside your space. Okay, so yeah, one.
So
yeah,
if we prove that in a sorry, should we?
Sorry.
May I proceed, sir?
Yes. You are.
Yeah, I was trying to make a uncountable independent set in this, like.
Yes. Good.
So we can take x power alpha, and alpha belongs to C.
Yes.
Or x, alpha belongs to C. So x power alpha is a continuous function, right? So that's why.
Yeah, that is one possibility.
That cannot be continuous, because if I take alpha to be negative, that's.
Yeah, so even we can go for a little lower level example. You can use the exponential function. Okay, Just that's the hint.
Yeah.
Use the exponential function to cook up this thing. Even from R to R, okay, the set of all continuous function from R to R, if you have to cook up an uncountable linearly independent set, exponential functions are natural choice. Okay, e
So
power
we will
lambda,
alpha
yeah,
z, yeah, alpha
e
z
power
is
lambda
equal
x, where lambda varies over all your real numbers. That is a continuous function. That's a differentiable function. Exponential functions. Okay. So yeah. Okay. At least I'm saying something new to most of you. I thought I'm coming last, and then maybe you might have got all these things. Okay. Good. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really impressed. Like, if you please keep on ask questions, okay, so that I can clarify all those, and then we can move forward. Okay, this is not like that. I prepared 21 slides. I had to discuss all 21 problems. Even if I discuss 10 problems, it should be like conceptually also it should be clear to you. Any other related question also you should be able to solve. Okay, that's the idea. Okay, so the first question, I think we are done. Use the exponential functions. And I'm not going into the details of how to show these exponential functions are linearly independent. Those things I'm just dumping on you. You had to verify that. Okay. Yes. Good. Okay. So do you want to discuss anything on this topic before moving to the next problem? Okay. That's great. Yes. Okay, we don't have any other question. Let us move on to the next problem. Okay, the set of all invertible matrices contains a basis for set of all n by n matrices. Okay, so here needless to say, if you want, you can consider C n by n or R n by n. Okay, maybe I will consider R by n by n. Okay, that is set of all n by n real matrices. Okay, the argument will similar for set of all n by n complex matrices. Okay, so they do admit a natural addition and multiplication. Okay, so that I think you have seen this in a more general context. Maybe in Murugan's lecture, we might have discussed about topology of this topology on these matrices. Okay, so here the linear algebraic question is: the set of all invertible matrices, do they contain a basis for the set of all n by n matrices? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So
True.
it does contain a 2 by 2 contain a basis which consists of invertible elements. Okay. So here I would like to tell you the strategy. If this type of problems, if you are trying to solve, okay. So one possible strategy is, so you know the standard basis for this case, right? So you know the standard basis is the ijth element is 1 and rest of the elements are 0. Okay. So just I am taking the case n equal to 2. Okay, to be more precise. Okay, so this is the basis for R2 by 2. Okay, so my aim is I want to show something is a basis or some family of matrices which have some property that's going to form a basis. Okay, so how to show that? The strategy is try to write down these basis elements, these standard basis elements, okay, as a linear combination of elements of those special type of matrices. Okay, so in this case, let us try to write down these basis elements as a linear combination of this set of all invertible matrices. Okay, so if I can show that, that means that so span of this script B is equal to R2 by 2. This we know. Okay, and this B is sitting inside span of your chosen the family of matrices. Okay, if you want, let me call that as script B prime. Okay, so this script B prime, this span will contains span of B. The reason is this element, the basis of the set B, okay, whose elements can be constructed from this B prime. Okay, so that is, if B is a subset of B prime, then span of B is again a subset of span of B prime. Okay, that is the but your entire universe is R2 by 2. Span of B itself is equal to R2 by 2 means here you don't have any option. This should be equality. Okay, so that means that this collection also contains a basis. Okay, so remember, I'm not constructing explicit basis. I'm just saying this set contains a basis. Okay, of course, one can construct explicitly. This is one useful strategy. Okay, so here what I will do, I will try to generate this 1 0 0. Okay, this is kind of if you understood this concept, then you have to just play with our common sense. That's it. Okay, so if I take these two matrices, okay, this 1 0 1. If you add them and if you take half of the sum, you will get 1 0 0 0. Fine. So both of the elements, this is an invertible element and this is an invertible element. Both are invertible. So now I think you can get rest of the elements, right? So half times. Okay, I will write one more term. If you are skeptical about how to get other elements. So if I take these two matrices, so these two matrices are upper triangular matrices. So upper triangular matrix, an upper triangular matrix is invertible if and only if its all diagonal entries are different from 0, which is apparent here. So this sum will give you 0 0 0 1. Okay, dividing it by half. Okay, so rest of the two elements you can canonically or naturally, if you imitate this process, you will get the rest of the two elements. So this standard basis elements, they are linear combination of some invertible matrices. So the set of all invertible matrices contains a basis. Okay. Any doubt here?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. So the other question is the set of all n by n matrices with the determinant plus minus 1. Okay. So now you should ask me a question. I argued only for n equal to 2. What about the general n? Okay. So this can be extended, right? This idea, the idea is crucial. This idea, if you understood, this can be extended for any arbitrary n by n matrices also. Okay. So I will. So the standard basis will consist of n square elements. Okay. The matrices which contains exactly one at one place and the rest of the entries are equal to 0. Okay. Now you play with this diagonal matrices, and this type of upper triangular matrices. Okay, upper triangular as well as lower triangular. So to get this element, okay, so you may to get this element you will need a lower triangular matrices. Okay, so this technique you could apply for the general n by n matrices. Okay, and the answer for the first question contains the answer for the second question. Okay, the set of all n by n matrices with the determinant plus minus 1 contains a basis for the set of all n by n matrices. So the matrices which we use to construct this standard basis vectors, okay, they are all these matrices. Either they are diagonal matrices or they are upper triangular matrices or lower triangular matrices. Okay, for these matrices, for determinant of these matrices have a nice formula. Let us just take the product of the diagonal entries. You will get the determinant of your given matrix, right? So all these matrices are contains either +1 or -1 in the diagonal. So determinant of all these matrices should be either +1 or -1. So the same thing as determinant plus minus 1. Okay, determinant of every element which you considered over here. Is it clear? Okay. What about the next question? The set of all n by n symmetric matrices. Do they contain a basis for the space of all n by n matrices? Some of the questions are extremely simple. Like we will be thinking in some other level. Okay. So what do you know about set of all symmetric matrices? Are they a vector space?
Yes, sir. They form.
It's a vector space. Okay. So the moment your basis consists of only symmetric matrices, okay, then span should be at most the set of all symmetric matrices. It cannot go outside that. Okay. The span of all symmetric. So set of all symmetric matrices is a subspace. Just informally write with the plus and the dot naturally defined over it. If you consider this as a subspace of subset of R n by n, okay, this is indeed a subspace. Okay, so you take any elements, you take their linear combinations, you will not come out of this set of all symmetric matrices. Okay, so the set of all symmetric matrices cannot contain a basis for the set of all n by n matrices. Okay, so not contains a basis. Contains a basis for R n by n. Okay, is it clear? These three problems.
Sir, can you repeat the ideology in the first one, sir?
In the
First
one.
option.
So first one, the idea is, so let us assume that you have a vector space. Okay.
Sir, I want to add something, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Sir, in the first place, sir, when you are going to repeat the idea, could you just, for the upper triangular matrices where you use, could you give us the way to generalize it in n dimensions? Just a hint. Just a hint. That
Yes,
will be.
yes. Okay, that is nice. Okay, so you let us take the ijth entry where I is strictly less than j. Okay, let us take I is strictly less than j. That is upper triangular entry I am considering. Okay, so I will fill all the lower triangular entries as zeros. Okay, I'll put everywhere in the diagonal equal to +1. Okay, and everywhere in the upper diagonal part also I will put 0 except the ijth entry. In the ijth entry I will keep only 1. Okay, only in the ijth entry. This round mark stands for ijth entry. Okay, so now I will construct another matrix. Okay, now I think you have to tell me. I have given you enough hint. So this is one matrix. What is the other matrix?
That will be at 1, there will be -1, and all their entry will be +1. I think, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So if you take these two and sum of these two matrices and take half of it, you will get the standard basis element. Okay, that's great. Okay.
Thank you,
So he was asking. Yes. Okay. Okay. So his question was how to get this idea. In general, like the vector spaces when you are dealing, so this type of if you have some known vector space, then you just think about the standard basis for that vector space. Okay, so if you are working with the polynomials, set of all polynomials of degree at most n, or set of all polynomials of any degree, if you consider, you just stick to your standard basis first. If you want to check the standard basis, I mean 1 x square and so on. Okay, so for Rn you take the standard basis e1, e2 and so on. Okay, if you want to show some set contains a basis for this space, you have to just show that the elements of the standard basis, they can be written as a linear combination of elements of a given set. If you can show that, then you can close your eyes and you can tell this set, whatever you are getting, it will be it will contain a basis. Okay. First of all, you should fix a basis which is known to you. Okay. Okay, I think that's clear to you. Let's see who asked this question. Okay, great. Okay. So next question is, which of the following matrices have the same row space of that matrix? This one. Okay. So maybe to start to start with, let me just define what's a row space. Row space is What is row space?
Space is spanned by the rows of a matrix.
Span of the rows of the matrix. Span of the matrix. Okay. Great. Yeah. So now we have 5 matrices. Okay. The question is, the first matrix given here, it has a row space. Okay. So for which of the following 4 matrices, the row space of the given matrix is equal to the row space of these matrices. Okay. Well, sometimes like you have to work from the answer. Okay. So here means you have to eliminate some answers. So here some options are trivial options which cannot occur as an which cannot be an answer. Okay. So for an example, if you see options D, okay, this cannot be a this matrix cannot have row space same as that of this matrix. The reason is, if you look at the last component, it is 0. More precisely, the last column of this matrix contains only zeros. Okay, so hence so here last column contains only zeros. So whatever linear combination we are going to take, that will give you only 0. You will not able to get non-zero entries. That means that if the row space of the given matrix and the row space of this matrix D given in D, if they are the same, then every row of your given matrix should be a linear combination of these 2 rows. Okay. So in particular, if I focus on the first row cannot be a linear combination of rows of this matrix. The reason is in the first row you have 4 here, but the 4 cannot be constructed from here. Okay, so this is not an option. And can you give a similar type of argument to exclude one more option from this list?
Yes, sir. C we can eliminate.
C you can remove. Okay. The reason is the first component of or the first column of the matrix given in C contains only zeros. So whatever linear combination you are going to choose, it does not matter. You will never get a non-zero entry in the first column. Okay. So that means that none of the rows of the given matrix can be spanned by this one. Okay. What about B? Let's focus on B. B, can it have same row space as of matrix? This is little complicated. I would say this is not true here. This is little complicated. You look at the linear combination. Okay. So in other words, look at the row space. Okay, 1 1 0. This is one component of your part of your linear combination, and 0 0 1 is the second part. You just carefully look at this rows. The first row contains 2 non-zero entries which are the same. In those places, the second vector don't have any non-zero entries. Okay, so all the non-zero entries of your if a vector in the linear span of these 2 rows contains a non-zero entry in the first 2 places, okay, those non-zero entries are coming from the first row. Similarly, the third non-zero entry is coming from only in the last row, the second row. Now, if you look at this row carefully, something is like some freedom is lost. The reason, what do you mean by that? You know the first entry, then you don't have any choice for the second entry. It should be same. Okay. So if you look at the first column or first row of the given matrix, which is 4 8 4. The first entry is 4, second entry is a multiple of 2 times 4. So obviously you cannot get this entry 4 8. At least the first 2 entries you will not be able to construct from this first row. You can construct 4 4 0 or 8 8 0. Okay, you will not be able to construct 4 8 0. And you cannot play with the linear combination because the rest of the vectors you have only zeros in the corresponding places. Okay, little tricky, I would say, but yeah. Go back to the first one. Yeah, so I think if you're writing an exam in computer, then you don't have any other option. So this should be true. So let us justify why it is true. Okay, so how to justify this? See, the rank of the matrix is true, is 2. Okay, a simple argument is just look at the first column and the second column. Okay, multiply the first column by 2, you will get the second column. Right? So rank of this matrix is equal to 2. So rank is nothing but the number of linearly independent rows, which is equal to number of linearly independent columns. Okay, so here you have rank 2, so it has two linearly independent rows only. Okay, okay, that is one observation. Okay, in fact, I can directly give you like what are all the possibilities. See, 1, 2, 0. Okay, so if I multiply this quantity by 2, the first row by 2, I will get 2, 4, 0. Right? So the last column, the last row of this matrix is already spanned by this 1, 2, 0. Okay. What about the second row? 3, 6, 1. Multiply this by 3. First row by 3. Keep the second row as it is. Add it, you will get 3, 6, 1. Right? So basically, I want to show, yeah, this is again another strategy. I want to show two spaces are equal. I'm trying to show I have two bases. Every element of one basis can be written as a linear combination of the other basis. Okay, that's the idea I'm repeatedly using. Okay, so 3, 4, 3, 6, 1. Just you multiply this by 3, you get a 3, 6, 0, and you just take one here. For the first row, just to check whether you are with me or not, what is the choice?
4 times first row.
4 times first row and 4 times second row. You add them, you will get it. Okay, so if you take the row space of this matrix given in A, okay, that contains the row space of this given matrix. Okay, the reason is every row of this matrix is the linear sum of these rows. Okay, so the space spanned by this space should be more. Okay, and it is trivial to see that these two vectors are linearly independent. 1, 2, 0, 0, 0, 1, they are linearly independent. So rank of this matrix is equal to 2. That is same as saying that the row space has dimension equal to 2. Okay, so you have two subspaces. Okay, two vector spaces. One is contained in other, and both of them are having same dimension. Okay, I will abuse the notation throughout this lecture. Okay, notations are local. So X I might have used for some other thing in the previous example. Okay, X is subset of Y. X is a space, vector space, and Y is another vector space. Okay, with respect to the same operation, X is a subspace we take. Okay, if dimension of X and dimension of Y over the same field, if they are the same, this will imply the vector space X should be equal to Y. Okay, this is an easy exercise to verify. Okay, I'm just using this. So here I'm saying what I'm saying. So the span of the row span of the row space of this matrix is contained in row space of this matrix. Both of them are having dimension 2, so you don't have the proper inclusion. It's an equality, proper equality. So for this matrix, you have the range space of row space of not range space. Don't confuse. Row space of the matrix given in A is same as row space of the given matrix. Okay, is it clear? For every
clear, sir, but I have one question, sir.
Yes.
Suppose in this questions option is not given. Suppose the question is like this: find the row space of this matrix.
Okay.
Then how to do?
Okay, there is no unique way of doing this thing. If you want, you can go for this elementary row transformations. Okay, apply the elementary row transformations to your given matrix and convert it to that canonical form. Okay, I think that's it's called canonical form. If any one of you know the terminology, you can correct it. Like you bring that to that upper
Echelon
triangular.
form.
Echelon form. Yeah, echelon form. Bring it to thank you. Bring it to echelon form, and the rows of the echelon, non-zero rows of the echelon form will form a basis for your this space.
My question is whether that and then any one of the option will match.
See,
I am reducing this matrix into its echelon form.
Yes.
Since it is a 3x3 matrix and it's a singular matrix, so it has 1 2 by 2 non-zero minor, so it has to rank 2.
Okay, so let me answer to your question. So you don't have to. So suppose the options are not given, then we cannot say or I don't know how to phrase this question if the options are not given. If your question is
simply
about
find the row space of this matrix.
So that answer don't have any unique answer. Suppose let me be more precise. Suppose from the basis point of view, if the question is asked, if you give me a basis for the range space, okay, then the basis is not unique. It's not possible to give the unique basis for the given problem. On the other hand, if you're asking for the explicit form of the subspace, okay, then something should be given to you. Either it is of the form, let's say, some nice spaces x, y, 0 or x, x, y, or x, y, y, those type of things. Okay, it should be clearly mentioned in the question. Okay.
Sir, I want to add something to this question.
Yes.
Like what he has asked. What is
Yes.
this question is which of the following matrices have the same row spaces as the matrix is given up to isomorphism? Then I think that will all true, right?
Here there is no need of isomorphism, right? We are working only inside.
Since if they all the options produces R2, they R produces the vector space R2, right?
No. That's not the right way. That if that is the case, you see any two-dimensional space, any rank 2 matrix you take of random order, okay, 3 or 4, then any two matrices of same rank will have same row space if your argument is correct. Up to isomorphism, any two finite dimensional spaces are the same. Here the numerics are important, the numbers are important.
Here the dimensions are like if I take dimension n is equals to 3.
Entries. By number I meant entries. Entries of the matrices are important.
Here you are talking in the case of when you talk about explicit row space, then the entries are important, right?
Yes, row space should be given explicitly because the argument is simple. If you consider up to isomorphism, then you take let's take 1000 by 1000 matrix, okay, 2000 by 1000 matrices with the rank 2, okay, they will have same row space up to isomorphism.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that is not very interesting here. We are interested in finding when they are the same. Okay, as we are discussing with as we are dealing with inside the space Rn, okay, when they are the same, that is the at least for this problem. Okay, that's the question.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Same. Okay, the same I'm highlighting. Okay, not up to isomorphism. As a set also they are the same. Okay. If you have any question, we can discuss further, or I can move on to the next question. This is another tricky question. So, how many of you know this question? Okay, the problem is you consider P3 the set of all vector space of polynomials of degree at most 3. Okay, and if you consider the collection of all polynomials which satisfies this property, okay, P of 1 equal to P of 2 equal to P of 3. That means that P is a polynomial. You evaluate the polynomial at the point 1, and you evaluate the polynomial at the point 2, and you evaluate the polynomial at the point 3. They are the same. Okay. Now assume that U is a subspace. Okay, you don't have to verify if U is a subspace or not. You assume that U is a subspace. Okay. Now the question is, what is the basis and what is the dimension of the basis? What is the dimension of the space? Okay. So nice. Yeah. Any suggestions, or you want to say something?
Sir, I guess the dimension is 3.
Dimension is 3. I don't think so.
How suppose if we take a polynomial x minus 1 in x minus 2 into x minus 3, then this polynomial belongs to U, because
Okay.
at 1, 2, 3 the values are 0. So this is a third degree polynomial. So we need x cubed, x squared, and constant term. So it is a linear combination of 1x. Oh, sorry, sir. We need 4. Dimension is 4.
No. Okay.
No,
Anyway,
but,
that's a good, right?
As sir said, basis element should be there now in U.
Okay. So let us take a polynomial in your U. Okay. It's a good guess. Yeah, both of you are doing good. Okay. So P of x, if it belong to U, okay, you are assuming that's a subspace. So I can assume P of 1 equal to P of 2 equal to P of 3. Okay. That means that so P of x, any polynomial in this one, this is equal to, sorry.
We can take this x minus 1.
Hold on. Yeah. I think x minus 1 into x minus 2 into x minus 3 plus some b. Okay. What is this b? What is b? So b is p of 1. Okay. So this polynomial, you see, p of 1 equal to p of 2 to p of 3 is equal to b. Okay. And remember that we are working with the polynomials of degree at most 3. Okay. So any polynomial for any polynomial for which p of 1 equal to p of 2 equal to p of 3, okay, so that can be written in this way. Why? So the common value I will take out, p of 1 equal to p of 2 equal to p of 3. P is any particular polynomial. Okay, so p of 1 minus b, that is p of 1. Okay, so this is the third degree polynomial. Okay, so for this third degree polynomial, 1, 2, 3 are roots. Okay, that means this can be factorized as x minus 1 into x minus 2 into x minus 3. Okay, if it is not monic, then you add some constant. I'm just justifying. It's like it is not coming from here. All of a sudden, this quantity is not showing up. Okay, it is, yeah. Okay, anyway, I will use something. So how did I get this quantity? I'm explaining here. Okay, so p of x equal to p of 1 equal to p of 2 equal to p of 3, which is equal to b. Okay, so if I take a p of x minus b, then if I substitute 1 here, p of 1 minus b, that is equal to 0. That means 1 is a root of the third degree polynomial. And if I substitute 2 again, p of 2 minus b, that is equal to 0. So 2 is a root. So x minus 2 is a factor. In the previous argument, x minus 1 is a factor. Similarly, p of 3 equal to 0, that will give you x minus 3 as a factor. Okay, so hence p of x minus b should be of the form something like a times x minus 1 into x minus 2 into x minus 3. Hence p of x should be of this form. Now you can tell me the dimension. What's the dimension of this space?
1.
You have to be careful. You need this constant term, right?
2. Yes, sir.
So this is the basis, in fact. So basis is this one. Basis is this one. Dimension is 2. Okay. This is one tricky way of doing this. Of course, one can go for a more naive way, which will be a lengthy process. I'm just skipping it. You can that will lead to Gaussian elimination and other things. Okay. The idea is very naive. You take a third degree polynomial. Okay. Let's take a0 plus a1 x plus a2 x square plus a3 x cube. Okay. Substitute x equal to 1, x equal to 2, x equal to 3. You will get 3 equations. Okay. 4 variables. Then you apply this Gaussian elimination and that. Then you find the relationship between the coordinates. Then you will get dimension of u equal to 2. That is little more lengthier process. I just want to use some shortcut. I think this is known. Just I have taken this from somewhere. I don't remember. Okay. If it is clear, let us move on to the next problem. Okay, this range finite is again showing up here. So you consider a set of all functions from the vector space R from R to R. Okay, so vector space with respect to the usual addition and scalar multiplication. The question is which of the following subsets are subspaces? Okay, so range of the function f is a finite set. Will it be a subspace? So subspace, now we have to check only 2 conditions. Okay, so 0 function, if you take 0 of x equal to 0 for every x, hence the range of the 0 function is a finite set. So 0 belongs to your set V1. I have to check this, but anyway. If you take 2 functions f and g, okay, both are having range finite. Okay, range finite means the from number of elements in your range of f as well as the range of g, they are finite. Okay, and alpha and beta are particular complex numbers. Okay, so when you consider alpha f plus beta g, again this will have finite range. Okay, that is number of elements in the range should be finite. It's a finite range set. At most it can have suppose the range of f has n elements and range of f g has m elements, then at most it can have n plus m elements, not more than that. Okay. So similarly, alpha f, if you consider, in fact, this will contain either exactly the number of elements in the range of alpha f will be exactly equal to number of elements in range of f, or it will be equal to 1, depending upon whether alpha is 0 or not. Okay. So if these 3 points are clear to you, then it's easy to say that the V1 is a subspace. Okay, just okay. Now one question is so what will happen if you take the set of all functions with the infinite range? The range of function, if they are infinite, will they form a vector space, vector subspace?
No, sir, because 0 function will not belong because the range of
Yes.
the 0 is
So if you consider only infinite range, then it will not form a subspace. The reason is 0 function will not belong to that. The 0 contains the range of 0 is contains exactly 1 element. Okay. Then what about the second problem?
It won't be
It won't be a subspace. Why?
if you take any 2 functions which say which have value 2,
Yes, great.
then
So if I take two functions,
product.
yes, yeah, you are right. So if I take the value of the function f at not equal to 2, okay. So if I take a function,
So simply we can take a constant function.
yes, constant function you can take. We take f of 2 equal to 2, okay. F of 2 equal to 2. So this is belong to V2.
Simply we take f of x equal to 4.
F of x equal to 4 will not belong to V2. F of 2 should not be equal to 4. So f of 2 equal to 2, that's the only restriction on the function I'm taking. So you take the function and you can extend this function to R in any way. If I take alpha to be equal to 2, alpha times f, okay, of 2, which is equal to 4, it does not belong to V2. Okay, so f belongs to V2, but alpha f does not belong to V2. It's just a warm up. Okay. Maybe I started at 6:35. I have 3 more minutes to complete. I'll explain this problem and then I'll stop. So have you seen this problem? Set of all invertible matrices whose entries are from finite fields. Anybody already discussed this problem?
No, so this problem is not discussed here.
Not discussed. Okay. So this is matrix M. This is a 4x3 matrix. So it contains a 4 rows and 3 columns. Okay. So the entries are from the finite field with 3 elements. Okay. So that means each of the entry of this matrix has 3 choices. Okay. But if you look at from that point of view, it may be a little difficult to solve this problem. We have to use the okay, at least it's given that it's a non-square matrix, so you have to find out the rank of this matrix. Okay, so if it's square matrix, the usual question would be something like how many invertible elements will be there. Okay, as I'm working with the non-square matrices, okay, we'll go for rank 3 matrices. That means you have to construct 3 rows which are linearly independent. Okay, that's the basic idea. You have 4 choices. Out of 4, 3 should have linearly independent. Okay, so let us, without loss of generality, let us try to work with the only first 3 rows. Okay. Okay. So this is an so for first row, how many choices are there? So first row consists of how many elements? 3 elements. Okay, so I want a matrix which is having rank 3. Okay, just I want to manipulate with only first three rows. Let us try to manipulate. Then I'll explain what is the reason. Okay. So how many choices are there for first row, which is linearly independent? Okay, or this question can be asked in the other way. Okay, wait a minute. Am I doing correct? It's a field consists of 3 elements. Okay, for the first one, get 3 power. Okay. So let me go for a column version. It may be easy to work. Okay. So these are all the columns. In each column, you have 4 elements, right? It's a 4x3 matrix. So I have to get a matrix whose rank is equal to 3. It's either row rank or column rank. I will focus on the column rank, okay, which is easy to work with in this problem. Okay. So column rank equal to 3 means all the 3 columns are linearly independent. Okay, so first column I want to the first column I want it to be a part of some linearly independent set. So obviously I cannot choose the 0 vector. Okay, all 0 entries if I put here, that will not serve the purpose. So you have to choose some non-zero vector. Okay, non-zero column vector consists of 4 elements from F3. Okay, so for each entry you have 3 possibilities in the first row. Okay, so 3 power 4 possibilities are there all together. But if I take 0 0 0 0 in all places, that case we don't want. So we have here 3 power 4 minus 1 elements. Okay, for the second column, if you see, again you have four elements are here. Okay, just if you look at this object as an element of this vector space F3 4. Okay, I want to choose this vector linearly independent of the first row vector. Okay, so if I have already fixed a vector for the first column, okay, so how many linear multiples will be there in F3 4? Okay, that's the question. So this will contain 3 multiples as the field consists of only 3 elements. Okay, 0 times the first column, that is 0 column, and 1 times the first column, the column itself, and 2 times the first column, that is the 2 times the first column itself. Okay, so other than that, whatever element you are going to choose from F3 power 4, they will be linearly independent of the first row. Okay, so that is basically we have to remove only 3 elements from your given field. Okay. Similarly, for the third column, how many choices will be there? So it should be linearly independent of first two columns. Okay, so can simply this extend this argument to show that you have to remove only 3 square elements. Okay, so if you want, you cannot have okay, basically the span of these 2 vectors. Okay, span of these 2 vectors, if I take this will be a subspace of this 3-dimensional space. Okay, how many elements it will have? The first 2 columns, if I take, I will have a linearly independent column vector over here only when this column vector belongs to the span of these 2 column vectors. If it is not happening, that means it is not belonging to the span of these 2 vectors. Okay, this subspace has dimension 3 square. Okay, the subspace of F3 power 4, this has dimension 3
Dimension 2, sir. Dimension will be 2.
Yeah, dimension will be 2 and the number of elements is 3 square. Yeah, you're right. Okay, dimension is 2 and number of elements is 3 square. So we have to remove these 3 square elements. Okay, that's all. That will give you this answer. Okay, so if this argument is clear, then you don't have to worry about this numbering patterns given in this problem. Okay, this can be more confusing also. We can give some more confusing options also. But if this trick is clear, then you don't have to. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's all for today. If you have any further questions?
Equivalent to say that the number of 3-dimensional subspace of set of all matrices of order 4+3.
Can you repeat subspace?
I believe here we are calculating this number now.
Yes.
I am identifying this number as the dimension of 3-dimensional. Sorry. I'm not able to tell. Okay. Okay, sir. Okay. I'm thinking a number of 3-dimensional subspaces of the given vector space. Can I think like that? This one?
I'm not sure about it. I'm not sure about it. But what you are saying is something non-trivial quantity. But there is a formula for it. I think this will call something.
Yeah. It seems like that one. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Grassmann space or something is there. So, yeah, I'm not sure about it. So this part I'm sure what I presented. You can go through our research lines if you want to know. Yeah. Yeah, other questions?
Can you repeat this because network is going to be very properly.
Which one?
This problem 61, sir. Just shortly.
Okay, so the okay, so I had to we have to see number of rank 3 matrices. Okay, in M, where M is the set of all 4x3 matrices with the entries are from the finite fields. Okay, so first observation is number of elements in M is finite. Okay, so now the question is you have to find out a subset is given to you. You have to count the number of elements in there. Okay, so maybe I'm assuming this fact without telling you. Like I'm taking row rank and column rank or same for this setup also. Okay, that result holds true here also. Okay, so instead of computing rank, I'm going to just tell you like the column rank is equal to 3. Okay, so I'm going to count the number of matrices which are having column rank equal to 3. So how to do that? So this is a 4x3 matrix. So it has 3 columns. Okay, so I'm going to consider each column as a vector. Okay, as a 4 vector. Okay, so each column, let me call this as C1, C2, C3. Each CA can be thought of as an element of this vector space F3R, F3 power 4. Okay, so this is one interesting exercise in maybe in linear algebra. You take any field F and you take n copies of your field F. Okay, then that will be a vector space over the field. Okay, like what you did with R and C. Okay, for finite field F3 you take 3 copies of F3. You will get that as a vector space with respect to the usual addition and the multiplication, the scale multiplication. Okay, you consider this C1, C2, C3 as an element of this vector space. Okay, so I want to show these 3 columns are linearly independent over on this vector space. Okay, so first of all, the first column, I want the first column to be a part of some linearly independent set. So it cannot be 0. Thus, all 0 element cannot be there. So you have to take some non-zero element. Remember, so this vector space contains how many elements? 3 power 4 elements. Okay, 4 tuples. Each tuple has 3 choices. Okay, out of these 3 power 4 elements, only one element is the 0 element. So I have 3 power 2. So out of these 3 power 4 elements, only one element is equal to 0. So 3 power minus 1 element I have for the first column. Okay, the number of choices for the first column, okay, is 3 power 4 minus 1. Now let us focus on the second column. The second column, for the second column, I had to choose it linearly independent. Okay, so linearly independent of what? Now we do have a vector. We have to choose the column vector C2, which is linearly independent of the first column vector C1. Okay, so as is a finite, we are working with the finite field. It is very easy to see how many linearly dependent vectors will be there, which are depending on C1. Basically, how many linear multiples will be there. Okay, so here I have one non-zero vector. It has 3 multiples. One is 0 times this vector, and 1 times this vector, and 2 times this vector. So these 3 possibilities, if I exclude, then rest of the vectors are linearly independent of this vector C1, this column vector C1. That means I have 3 power 4 minus 3 possibilities for C2. Okay, and C3 if I focus. Okay, so now the sort of trial and error, it will be more tricky. But now you see, if I want to choose the third column as linearly independent of the column C1 and C2. Okay, that means that in terms of vector space, if you translate this problem, I want to choose C3, which does not belong to span of the column vectors C1 and C2. Okay, the span of the column C1 and C2 is exactly the vector space spanned by these vectors C1 and C2. Okay, so which is a 2-dimensional space, which is a 2-dimensional subspace of F3, 4. So it should have cardinality 3 square. Okay, so you have to remove the 3 square elements from 3 power 4. Rest of the elements are linearly independent of the vectors C1 and C2. Okay, so this is the argument. Okay, is it clear?
Is it? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think I'll stop here. If you have any questions, we can discuss.
Sir, any particular reference book you are talking here, like for the problem solving aptitudes in linear algebra? I have followed like almost, but it's
Almost.
yeah, but it's very hard for me after going some
Yes,
chapters.
there is a book by Bhima Sankaram and Ramachandra Rao. Tomorrow Jayaraman will be giving a talk. He will be also referring to the same.
Okay.
Most probably. Okay. So linear algebra. By Ramachandra Rao. It's the Trim series book. Text and readings in mathematics. Okay, Ramachandra Rao and Bhima Sankaram. Both are mathematicians from Indian Statistical Institute. Okay. Sankaram. Yeah. If you're doing any spelling mistake, you can correct me. So these books are there in the Trim series. Text and readings in mathematics. Okay, published by Hindustan Book Agency. So Indian. So it's an Indian edition. It's worth to have this book. Okay, when you are applying, when you are preparing for competitive exams.
For problems, like in the case for problems, right?
Both the theory as well as contains a lot of problems. Okay,
I can use it as a reference book also, like
yes, it's a very standard book, I can say. From matrix theory, so linear algebra, there are two approaches. If you see a book by what you said, the Halmos or Hoffman and Kunz,
yeah,
okay,
Hoffman
those
is
classic
very
texts are developed from the linear transformation point of view. And of course, Hoffman and Kunz, if you see, the authors are saying the theory for linear transformations. Then after that, they will fix a basis. They will state the theorem for matrices also. The Bhima Sankaram, Rao and Bhima Sankaram, advantage of this book is this is a purely matrix theoretic approach. Okay. And this is a nice book to read.
Thank you.
Sir, can you tell about this type of linear transformation?
Your voice is breaking.
Consider a set of all n by n matrices.
Okay.
A is a invertible matrix.
Okay.
Then the linear transformation P from this set of all n by n matrices to this n by n matrices is defined by T of B equals to AB.
I don't know.
Can you talk about this linear transformation?
Okay, so you are defining a linear transformation from n by n to n by n. What is
A is a A is a fixed invertible matrix.
Okay. So
T
what
of
is
B equals to
okay? T of B.
X equals, okay. T of B equals to AB.
AB. Okay.
I want to know what is the rank of this. About this transformation, I need to study. Rank, nullity, everything.
Yeah, then you have to work out one by one. Maybe I think I can say something. This is an invertible matrix. So when you pre-multiply by an invertible matrix, you can say this cannot change the nullity and rank of this matrix B, if I'm right. So that I can verify here. I don't know, I'm just trying. If I do any mistake, you just stop me. So let us take
No, I also don't know.
So you
just
take X belongs to Rn, A, B, X equal to 0. That is, I'm taking a matrix in the null space of AB. Okay, as A is invertible, so I can pre-multiply by A. So null space of AB, I have taken an element that is sitting inside null space of B. Okay. Now, if I take an element in the null space of B, then pre-multiplying by A will not affect anything. And in fact, this is much more general. So null space of B is sitting inside null space of AB. So that is null space of AB is in fact equal to null space of B. So nullity of the matrix B will not change. Okay, so that restriction you have. And of course, if you apply rank-nullity theorem, then you can get the rank of the matrix product AB also will not be changed. Okay, up to this point, this much you can say. If B is a matrix of rank R, then image of this matrix T under this map image of this matrix B under this map T is also having same rank. That you can say. Sorry.
Anything about eigenvalues and determinant?
You are not audible. Your voice is breaking.
Value and then determinant, sir.
Determinant, yeah, determinant you can compute because so determinant of T you want to compute.
Yeah.
That's a tricky question. I had to see.
That will be n cross n square cross n square matrix.
Yes,
So it
yes.
would be not easy to compute, I think, right? Yeah, that's computable.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
It may
computable.
not be.
No. This type of questions also sometime CSR question paper. These type of problems also available.
Yeah, sometimes for a fixed B we can use, sir. We can use the property of determinant.
Instead of invertible matrix A, they are taking arbitrary matrix also.
I don't know. I had to think about it. You just this is the general process. Like you fix a basis for your domain R n by n, and compute its all its images. Okay, so from there, either there are many approaches. One is if it is possible to find out all the eigenvalues of your given matrix, then you could go for it. If you can find out all the eigenvalues, then the determinant, if you are asking, just take the product of all the eigenvalues. That will give you the determinant. Okay, that is one possible approach. So in this case, you have to see what are the eigenvalues of this matrix. So this may not be. Let's see what's happening. So dB of x, which is equal to lambda x, you want. So that means you want b abx equal to lambda x. I think this is not an easy problem to solve. Yeah, so you have to abx.
You can pre-multiply by A.
Abx equal to lambda x. Two matrices. So I'm not sure how to compute the product of in case of products what will happen. Abx. Yeah.
Sir, why did you add x here since B is already a variable?
That?
Sir, why did you add x here since B is already a variable? T is a linear transformation from R.
So this is eigenequation. Yeah, you're right.
Lambda B.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. Thanks for the correction. T of B is equal to lambda B. You're right. So AB equal to lambda B. Will it give some insight? So for what matrices B, you will get AB equal to lambda B.
Now both the side we can multiply by A inverse now.
Yeah, that will it give any information? Lambda times A inverse B.
B equals to, we'll get lambda into A inverse of B.
So we have to solve this problem for B and lambda. Okay, both sides you have unknowns. Okay, B also unknown and lambda is also unknown.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it maybe some trick should be there. I just spontaneously I don't know. I have to think about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The other questions?
Sir, thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Manan.
Thank you for your lecture, sir. Participants, if you have any queries, you can ask through WhatsApp. post your queries through WhatsApp. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for a nice lecture, sir.